Welcome to SIWI Corner, where we explore important water issues with knowledgeable guests. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the water world's more controversial topics, water and conflict. And joining me to navigate those waters, I have Karin Gardes, SIWI's Chief Operating Officer, who also heads our Transboundary Water Cooperation Department, as well as Panchali Saikia from SIWI's Water and Sanitation Department, who has written a report on the intersections of conflict and gender in the context of COVID-19. So Karin, will future wars be fought over water?
Probably not exclusively over water, but unequal access to water or water scarcity are definitely factors that can increase tensions between and among communities that can possibly lead to escalating violence and possibly full-scale conflict. A couple of decades ago, there was quite a lot of talk about the possibility of water wars. There is no evidence that that has materialized. However, I want to stress that circumstances do change, and we're seeing today a new kind of risk where climate change is most definitely a multiplier of threats. So droughts, lack of water, lack of access to water can definitely spur a negative spiral of increased violence and potentially fuel full-scale conflicts.
I can imagine. And on that note, let's have a look at a map of what water stress will look like around the world in 2040. According to these projections from the World Resources Institute, the red and darker red countries have a high likelihood of experiencing water stress by 2040. So these areas could see an increase in conflict as stress increases.
If you look at the map, we see that water scarcity is increasing most rapidly in fragile and conflict-affected regions. They are the most vulnerable, lacking basic access to water and sanitation. And according to the WHO and UNICEF's Joint Monitoring Program report, only 63% of people have access to drinking water in fragile state, as compared to 90% in non-fragile states. In terms of sanitation, this is just 41%, as compared to 70% in the non-fragile states.
Well, it really is a stark difference. And of the world's 17 most water-scarce countries, we see here that 12 of them can be found in the Middle East. What can be done to improve the prospects there?
It's extremely concerning to see the overlap that Panchali was mentioning. And I think that if anything, it really shows how water-stressed countries are also being conflict affected. And this is, of course, very, very serious. If anything, I think it really shows how dependent we are on water and on significant amounts of water, and how far we're all ready to go to secure that access to water. What it also shows, I think, is a need for a new approach to security work, an approach that integrates climate action, conflict prevention, peace building, but not least governance of natural resources. And this is something that we have talked about during World Water Week at SIWI's annual high-level panel on water diplomacy.
I would like to really stress on what Karin said about governance. Improving water governance is very much important in these fragile and conflict-affected states, already facing weak institutions, low capacity, low levels of trust among water users and decision makers and service providers. And this becomes even important with the ongoing threat of climate change and also the worsening water security.
You mentioned water governance there. What exactly do we mean when we say that?
Water governance is basically who gets what water, when and how. Let me explain this briefly. When we talk of effectively managing water resources and ensuring water services are provided to people, the sector needs to really have plans, policies, budgets, and regulation. But what is also important is that how these are performed, how these are designed and implemented, whether in a transparent, accountable, participatory manner or not. whether it includes all the perspectives of water users, the communities, private sectors, etc. And this is really important in terms of ensuring that these policies are in place and also performed using these good governance principles. And this is what all water governance is about.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And recently you wrote a report together with another SIWI colleague, Dr. Martina Klimes, on how poor water governance can actually fuel violence.
Yes, with our Water and Peace advisor, Dr. Klimes, and a former colleague of ours, Alexandra Sage, we did this study to understand the security impact of the global pandemic in these fragile and conflict-affected states. And this, we also found that these regions were already facing water scarcity. It got even worse during the pandemic. We also saw some incidents of water infrastructures being attacked, dams and reservoirs being attacked by armed non-state actors. And evidences show that armed non-state actors often try to take advantages of such crisis situations, in terms of providing local water resources, taking control of them, and also providing services to people to gain legitimacy. And this was also quite evident during the Ebola crisis.
Okay, interesting. And so how can good water governance help in these situations?
The good news is that you can prevent this by proactively working on improving water governance. And this is what we found in terms of really looking into improving the citizens and state accountability, looking into long-term planning and preparedness, rather than just focusing on immediate emergency responses. We also found in a study that empowering and supporting local solutions can be very beneficial. There were a lot of women-led organizations who were taking initiatives at a local level that had a great impact. And this becomes really important when we look into ensuring women's role. Women play a leading role in terms of as a ground support, in terms of providing healthcare at household, even at healthcare facilities, and as peace negotiators. This kind of peace processes and opportunities are often overlooked.
I really want to emphasize what Panchali has said about the importance of this genuine inclusion of the gender perspectives in strengthening peace. This is not new, and there is a plethora of research sustaining that. It's so important to really have such an inclusive process. Peace processes that include a gender perspective has 35% more likelihood of actually lasting at least 15 years. So again, this is not something that not all of us know. We need to act upon it. And by genuine inclusion, I mean not only being included maybe in the process of the discussions, but also at the ultimate decision-making moment when the real decisions are being made. This is something that SIWI is really working extensively on in all of its projects.
And are we seeing much progress on this front?
Well, we are seeing some progress, not enough, of course, but we are seeing some progress. And building on SIWI's work, for instance, in the SIWI-supported Women in Water Diplomacy Network in the Nile, we are seeing that women are being increasingly invited at the table, at the negotiating table, and dare to be also there, making their voice heard at the decision-making moments.
Yeah, and beyond that project, that is something we're working very hard to mainstream across mainstream gender equality across all of our work.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Georgette.
And the Nile network, it sounds really interesting. I can imagine there is plenty of competition over water in the Nile region, as there are so many countries depending on this single shared water resource.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And these tensions in the region regularly make it to the headlines. So obviously they are there. But I also want to stress that there is actually cooperation, and this is something that we need to learn from and to build further going forward. How water and finding appropriate shared water governance mechanisms and solutions can really be a tool and a key to unlock the peace-building mechanisms and processes as well. So countries sharing a river, a lake, or a groundwater aquifer will have a much better chance to cope with water scarcity and climate change and the effects of climate change if they actually work together to protect that resource and manage it wisely. And this is something that really creates a win-win scenario.
That's amazing to hear that there are those opportunities. And before we continue, let's have a look at some statistics on just how many countries and people we're talking about when we talk about these shared waters. Looking at these statistics, it's overwhelmingly clear that there is a lot of opportunities for this cooperation across boundaries. But how common is that sort of cooperation?
Well, for transboundary river basins, about 1/3 actually have a cooperation framework agreement in place. That means that 2/3 do not. And when it comes to groundwater, there are even fewer such agreements or mechanisms in place. And I find that really, really worrying, since very many of the aquifers are dangerously mismanaged with both pollution and over-abstraction. So the medium to long-term consequences of this mismanagement are really, really serious, with significant water scarcity down the line.
Yes, and this is something that Dr. John Cherry, the Stockholm Water Prize laureate from 2020, has been warning us about for quite some time.
Absolutely, you're so right, and that is so good that he has won the prize and emphasized this. But I also want to say that there is a lot of cooperation, and there are good examples of countries finding solutions to cooperate over shared waters. And that's really something that I want to promote and that we need to promote and learn from going forward. And this cooperation is possible and will be made possible only if there is an understanding of the context, both political, geopolitical, and also environmental, of course, and the possible solutions that are there and that are available. But last but not least, it will heavily depend on the presence of a political will.
I agree. Countries do cooperate in some form or the other, but it's important that they comply with those formal agreements that they have, and also ensuring transparency and accountability in terms of really having a continuous dialogue beyond just sharing hydrological data, and also ensuring well-functioning institutions are there. There is a joint decision making, and this decision must reflect perspective of all water users, from local to national, and not just government to government. All in all, I would say improving water governance will be fundamental. Then transboundary cooperation will be really an important tool in terms of building resilient societies.
Thank you, Karin and Panchali, for guiding us through this relationship between water and conflict and sharing your insights and knowledge. While it was, of course, concerning to see how water stress is expected to worsen and the impact that COVID-19 has had on already fragile states, there is hope. By focusing on good water governance and seeing shared waters as an opportunity for collaboration, water can be a force of justice and equality. Not least starting with ensuring that any peacemaking processes are inclusive to ensure not only their success, but to afford all individuals their right to participation. SIWI works tirelessly with all of these topics and continues to advocate for just, inclusive and sustainable solutions to conflict over water. Thank you all for watching, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day at World Water Week. You can join us later on for next SIWI Corner, where we'll be talking about the Stockholm Water Prize.